I remember one time on a Sunday morning in one of my smaller congregations, a young man said he wanted to talk to me after the services. And I had done his wedding to a young woman that was a member of the congregation some months before. And so I was kind of concerned that something was going on. But it turns out that they had been going to Bible study at a Baptist church. And so he told me that, scripture said that women should not teach men and all those different kinds of things. And he said that we really, needed to honor that. And so I looked up the part he was talking about. I think it's in First Timothy. And it was interesting because right after that, it said that women should not braid their hair or wear pearls and some other things. And his sweet young wife who was there had her hair in a French braid and was wearing pearl earrings. How ironic. And I pointed that out. And well, that's different. That really wasn't the same kind of thing. And he said to me, how are you going to answer God when you stand before, what do you think God's going to say to you when you stand before the throne after you die? And I said, I hope and believe that God will say to me, well done, good and faithful servant. This pastor who had been sort of mentoring us through the Bible studies we teach said to me, you have a really good grasp of theology and a real love of the church and dedication. So I think it'd be really good if you were a pastor's wife. Now, looking back, you'd think he would have said, if you went to seminary, but that wasn't really on people's screen very much then. I didn't know when I went to college that women were being ordained. That vote happened in 1970, and it didn't get out to the West Coast where I was going to PLU in Tacoma. I'm Kate LePard, and I've been a pastor for 33 years in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, and I love it. When I was in 7th grade, I wanted to be a nun, except that I also wanted to get married and have children. But in the library, I read everything I could find about women who were nuns and women who were saints. And I think I just felt a call to the church, but didn't have any channel for that. When I finished college, even though I learned shortly thereafter that there were female clergy, I had never seen one. I did not know any. And so I couldn't quite imagine myself in that role, even though I longed to be more involved in the church. When I'm not being a pastor and just living my life away from the church, one of the things is I tend to be a sporadic prayer. I'm not as well disciplined as I would like to be with devotions and that kind of thing. I like to work on preparing for a sermon even when I'm at home, and I enjoy that kind of thing. But I pray about every little thing, it seems like, that comes along. And I think perhaps my mother taught me that when I was young. Thank you for this, or I'm really worried about this, or it sounds ridiculous, but when I hear like an ambulance, I pray for whoever it is in the ambulance, and so I think it's kind of an ongoing awareness of the presence of God with me and in my life and in the world. I really believe, even when we can't see it, God is working very much in the world. And I'm not saying that there aren't times when I forget and don't think about God for a while. That happens. I think that's fairly normal. But in a lot of my daily life, I have this sense of God's presence, not necessarily feeling it somehow emotionally. It's almost more, I believe it or I think it. Because, emotions are so fickle and depending on what's going on and all that. But I just believe that God is there. I think my calling's kind of evolved over the years. I think about when I first came out to the synod and there were 3 female pastors in the synod. So everywhere I went, I was the first female that someone had seen presided a wedding or a funeral or preach or lead a workshop or speak at a retreat or a conference. And I got asked to do that a lot because people were trying to have a representative woman. When they had speakers at a conference, they wanted to have one of them be a woman. And so even though I hadn't been out of seminary very long, I got asked to do a lot of things, and it was really fun and challenging. And I've always been a feminist, or at least, since high school. But I didn't wear it as a chip on my shoulder. I tried to have a good sense of humor about it because people would say the strangest things when they first met me and found out I was a pastor, and you could get very offended. But I tried to have a sense of humor about it most of the time. And so I did feel like I was kind of representing women when I did all these different things. But as more and more female pastors came into our synod, then I didn't feel the need to do that so much. When I first came, I faced a lot of adversity as a female pastor. The Baptist church down the street, the pastor said from the pulpit that my whole congregation was going to go to hell because they called a women. And I went to the Ministerial Association, and most of the men, I was the only female there, most of the men ignored me. If I said anything, they pretended like nothing had been said. And so after a couple times, I quit coming. I think my calling has evolved over the years, and sometimes it depended on the location of my congregation and what was going on with those people. When I was in Pinehurst, Idaho, it was loggers and miners, and those are 2 of the most dangerous professions. Lots of accidents, injuries, some deaths, and so you get drawn into a certain kind of situation. Then when logging was depressed and the mines closed, we were trying to help people just survive and have what they needed. And I got drawn into, at that point, a lot of dealing with domestic abuse, not necessarily with members of my congregation, but I think women in the Silver Valley heard about a female pastor that they could talk to. And sometimes I even helped some women get out of those situations and find a place to live. And that was before we had shelters for women from domestic violence. For a long time, I've mentioned periodically in sermons that I have clinical depression because I want it to be something people aren't embarrassed to talk about. And sometimes when you mention certain things from the pulpit, it's like it gives people permission to bring that into their conversation, maybe at their Bible study group or their small group or something like that. So that kind of honesty helped me be, I think, a little more real sometimes. But I did feel that I had to kind of turn on this personality, no matter how I felt, that was positive and cheerful. And to a certain degree, that's, I think, the right thing to do because you're not in the position where you want to burden your parishioners, your members or colleagues, with what you're struggling with, because they come to you and want some conversation, mostly about and appropriately what's going on in their lives. So I would share little pieces here and there, just if it seemed appropriate to help someone understand that I had some experience with what they were dealing with. When my first husband left me, I was in seminary, and I had loved him deeply and was very brokenhearted. And thankfully, I had support from faculty members and good people around me. But I remember going to chapel. We had chapel, I think, 3 times a week. And it was a wonderful experience with different music and different preachers and things. But I was just kind of numb, and I just didn't feel like I could say the Apostles' Creed and some of the prayers. But I felt comforted by the fact that the people around me were all saying the creed, the prayers, singing the hymns that I couldn't sing right then. I felt like they were carrying me along until I would regain some of the faith and the comfort level with what had happened. It was just so good to have the community, and that became really important to me, and gradually I recovered the kind of faith that I had before, and maybe deeper, because when you go through really tough times, that deepens your experience in so many ways. And when I was getting divorced, there were people in the congregation I was working at then who said, "Oh, this is going to make you a really good pastor. This is going to make you a better pastor." And I just wanted to say, I don't care, I'd rather not go through this and not be such a good pastor, which was, pretty self-centered, but still people can be strange in the things that they say. They want to kind of smooth things over and make you feel better or whatever, But the truth was, they were right. It did probably make me a better pastor.